Hey everybody, today I'm talking about Puerto Rico by Andreas Seyfarth. Now this is a board game for 2 to 5 players, takes about 90 minutes to play and dates back to 2002. Now Puerto Rico was an extremely influential game on the hobby. It was ranked number 1 on Board Game Geek for many years, so it is very highly regarded and critically acclaimed. And considering it's 18 years old and this game is still in the top 25 games, then I think that's a pretty impressive feat. Now, obviously, the objective of the game is to get as many victory points as possible. It's a Euro-style game. And the kind of theme or the idea is that everybody or every player involved has their own kind of bit of Puerto Rico, and you're trying to kind of colonize that area by planting plantations, building factories, getting colonists to try and produce goods and try to ship those goods off to get victory points. Puerto Rico has a very kind of unique feel to it, or a unique vibe, where not only do you have to look after yourself by obviously trying to get as many victory points as you can for each of your actions, but you've got to be very wary about what you do, because every kind of action you take, you've got to be careful about how well your kind of opponents are going to benefit off taking that action, because the game uses this kind of very clever action selection mechanism, which is actually one of my favourite mechanisms in all board games. And I think it kind of stems back to Puerto Rico as a kind of foundation for that mechanism, where you have a bunch of kind of roll cards and you're going to select one of them when it's your turn. But you're not going to be the only one who takes it. Every other player is going to get to take that action as well. But the benefit by taking that action is that you're going to get a kind of a unique or a kind of small or amplified version of that action. So, for example, one of the actions is to take buildings or to build a new building by paying coins. And if you are the person to choose that role, then you're going to get a building at a discount. So you've got to be as efficient as possible. And it really is a game about nuances, because the margins for error are very kind of, or should I say the margins to gain more than your opponents are very kind of marginal, and you've got to be very kind of, exploit every single point you can get out of this one, which is a different vibe, and it's not a particularly swingy game. You've got to be very careful and very calculated about how you're going to gain, even if it's slightly more than your opponents do each turn. So the game, as I said, boiled into that very simple mechanism about choosing one of those roll cards. And I've already covered one of them, which is to build one of the new buildings. And these buildings are extremely useful because they can really take you down a different path than your opponents. They're all very powerful, obviously have different kind of costs depending on how beneficial they are. They all have victory points associated to them for endgame scoring. And they do all kinds of different things, such as increasing your kind of capacity for storing things, or making things more profitable when you sell them in the market, or maybe building factories to kind of combine with your plantations so you can actually manufacture the goods in the first place, and all kinds of things like that. So another action you can take is to, I think it's called the mayor, where you can take new colonists from the boat and add them to your plantation or to your region, and you can apply them to your factories and your plantations. And for every kind of combination of the two you have, you can produce goods. So obviously having workers in these different places is very important, because without the workers, then you're not going to be able to do very much at all. But the benefit by taking that action is that you get to take one more worker than the other players. So again, very useful, and that small margin can be very, very beneficial long term. Another one is simply to take money. Another one is to sell goods, and if you choose that tile, then you get to sell for kind of, I think it's a one more profit than you'd normally get. And the market as well is quite interesting, because once you sell one type of good, nobody else can sell that type of good. So again, you can be very careful about when you're going to use it. For example, if I had a coffee and everybody else has coffee, and I'm the first to choose it, I might choose to sell my coffee for a good profit. But then nobody else could sell their coffee, and they would have to sell something cheaper, or maybe get shut out of selling anything at all. So again, very, very got to be very careful about what other players are capable of at all times. Another thing you can do is that you can buy plantations, or just pick up plantations, which is added to your kind of field area, which basically determines which kind of goods you can produce. You've got like your indigo, you've got corn, which is the actual only good that doesn't require a correlating factory with it. So while it's the cheapest, it's very useful because you don't have to You don't have to have a accompanying factory to go with it. And ultimately, when you sell everything using the captain action, all the goods are worth the same. So the only kind of benefit of having the more expensive goods is that they're going to be worth more when you sell them. But in addition to that, when you do sell, or when you do ship off goods for a victory points, obviously depending on the player count, there's going to be a limited amount of boats available, and only certain type of goods or only one unique good can go on each boat. So if I had indigo and the person to my left had corn, so I load all my indigo onto one boat, the next person loads all their corn, and then the person after that might not have any corn or indigo and have only got tobacco, for example, and then they've got nowhere to load their goods at all. So they're going to get completely shut out of that action. So again, all about being aware of what you can do and how you're going to benefit that margin more than your opponents can on each and every turn. And that's basically how the game's going to go. You're going to all take a pick of your roll card, one after one, all take that action, and all to try and produce as much goods as possible and ship them off on these boats. But you've got to be very careful, because after every time you use that captain action, or somebody uses it, all of your goods, apart from one, are going to be discarded, and that's if you don't have the relevant warehouses to store your surplus goods. So again, you can be very clever about when you're going to ship stuff off when you know your opponent's got a lot of things stored up, and just completely make them throw it all away, which can be pretty nasty, but you know, sometimes you need to do that in order to win the game. So yeah, I love the simplicity and how the depth of the game is boiled down into such clean-cut role choices, and you're always involved in every choice, because you know, if someone chooses something, you're still going to get to do the action. You've got to be kind of aware of what you think other players will do at the same time as well, because if it's your go and you kind of want to do two things, but you're confident that the person to your, another player is going to choose your secondary option, then you can kind of, cater your strategy to your needs and just hope, or, make an educated guess about what other roles players are going to choose. And also player order is very important as well. So you've got to bear all these different things in mind when somebody's selecting a role card. Another thing that's interesting as well is that when every player's taken an action, all the role cards that aren't used acquire a coin on top of them as well, which makes them a lot more kind of, makes the incentive to pick them up in future rounds a lot kind of stronger, because money is a very strong resource in this game, and is extremely useful for building up your engine, trying to get all those really powerful, juicy buildings, which are very scarce, because there's not going to be enough kind of duplicate buildings for everybody. So if somebody buys a certain type of building, you might be completely shut out of getting that type of building, which can be very devastating to your plans. If you don't have the warehouses, you're going to have to be very careful about not storing up too much goods. Some of the buildings are so interesting, such as you've got the wharf, which kind of lets you have your own dock when you can sell stuff and not be so dependent on what's available on the boats. You've got things that let you kind of automatically take colonists when you take your quarries and buildings. You've got the big buildings, which are endgame scoring, which can kind of give you bonus points based on whether you have a certain amount of colonists, or for every point you've acquired, you get another amount of points, or stuff like that. So you've got the points from the buildings, you've got points from selling stuff, and you've got the points from the endgame scoring from the large buildings. So a lot of things you can kind of focus on, and you can do well by focusing on all the different strategies. But I think having an interest in all these different kind of ways to get points is the key to victory in this game. But yeah, so mechanically, this game is absolutely faultless. It works so well, so smoothly. It's easy to digest, and it just ticks along very nicely. The balance of the game is wonderful. Again, it's going to be something to wrap your head around for new players. I think more kind of savvier, more experienced players are going to pretty much run away with the game in terms of it, of winning for those initial plays. But once you get your head around how the game works, and if you're playing the game with people with equal experience, you're going to have a very balanced and fair game every time. Time investment as well is very good. There's literally no scope to lose interest here, because you're always invested in what other people are going to do, about what action you want to take and when. Player order, all that different stuff. It's all keeping you engaged at all times. and there is very little downtime anyway. Replayability wise, there's always going to be, the building's going to be taken in different orders. You're going to have to be forced to do different things and try different things each time. You might want to get a kind of a stronghold on a certain type of resource and maybe shut out other players of that market. So when you do use that captain action to sell your goods, you can kind of make sure that you're the only person who can load stuff onto that boat and secure yourself that way. So it's about finding little gaps in the market and exploiting them, which is really useful, and it's going to basically tailor or force you to tailor your strategy to how the other players are behaving each time. So always going to be something else to explore, and they're going to have a different vibe every time you play. Interaction is brilliant in this game. I mean, the nuances between how everything comes together and how you're going to use things is what this game is all about. And although there is very kind of, there is a touch of meanness and a spiteful, interaction in the game. I wouldn't say it's too much. I mean, you're not directly smashing other people's things. There's no ability to destroy other people's buildings or anything like that. It's about being clever and savvy and knowing how to exploit the situation to your benefit and to hinder your opponents. Aesthetically, this game looks very basic, I'll be honest. It's an Alea production, which generally is very kind of functional and, nothing more beyond that. There's not really any bells or whistles. That being said, I think the tiles and stuff are pretty clear of what they do. There's not too much rule digging every time or anything like that. It's very functional, basic components. The cardboard is pretty flimsy. The game looks pretty beige and dull, I suppose. If this isn't your cup of tea, you're normally into your kind of high production, it's going to look quite boring. But for me, it's got a kind of a bit of a charm to it, and I think it's that retro feel does shine through. But ultimately, I think the gameplay trumps the visual appeal to it. But I suppose if you had a nicer production of it, then that would help. So. Production-wise, it's functional but pretty basic. And theme-wise, I actually do like the way the theme works. I think it works and comes together very nicely. Bringing in the colonists into your plantations, getting the plantations, filling up your factories, shipping them off for profit. I do like the way everything works, but I think there is a bit of a stigma with this game with the whole kind of colonist kind of theme to it. The exploitation of slaves and stuff like that. I personally. For me, it's a board game. It doesn't really need to delve into that territory, so I'll leave it at that. And you can have your own opinions. But personally, I think it works well. And setup and teardown time as well. I mean, there's a lot of different buildings and stuff which do take a bit of time to get everything in position in that kind of communal board. But the game is more than warrants the setup. There's not too much, and it's not a barrier to entry to playing the game. So. I love the way the game ramps up as the game goes on. You get more kind of powerful as you acquire these buildings. You produce more and more and more. You feel like you're doing more on each time, which is always important for a Euro game. The game scales very well. I mean, it works all player counts, and because of the way that the role selection works, everybody's always engaged. And something that I'm quite surprised on is the game actually works really well at 2 players. I think initially the game wasn't recommended for anything below 3 players, and I don't even think the original version had that kind of option in the rulebook. But I have played the game at 2 players and it works extremely well. Just the role selection works slightly different, where you take a few rolls each round. So don't be concerned. It does work very well at 2 players, and it works all the way perfectly well up to 5 players. And in comparisons to other games, I mean, I can't quite put my finger on anything this is quite like. Obviously, there are a lot of other games that use the role selection mechanism, but I have not used them in such a Euro kind of capacity. Games like Twilight Imperium use it. I think Rising Sun used it. But yeah, that mechanism is something I absolutely love and would love to see it more and more and more. But yeah, overall, this game is an outstanding design. It is wonderfully just created, and everything forges really well. The player interaction is fantastic. You're always going to be engaged. There's plenty of things to think about. You're going to want to do lots of different things at the same time, which you can't. Sometimes you're going to feel slighted and frustrated about what other people have picked, but you're going to do the same to them. The game lasts, I think, the perfect amount of time. It doesn't outstay its welcome. And again, it's all about the nuances. There really aren't that many games out there. Well, I suppose I'll rephrase that by saying all games are obviously subjective to how good they are. Everybody's going to have their own opinions and tastes and stuff like that. But I think there are a few games out there that are objectively extremely well designed and just brilliant. For me, Puerto Rico is one of those objectively brilliant games. It is just an absolute masterpiece on how it's come together, and you know, there's a reason why it's stayed relevant for so long. And you know, for a game that's 18 years old to still be, I think it's ranked number 23 on Board Game Geek, is, you know, it's not, that's something like that doesn't happen for no reason. And you know, playing it myself now, I can completely see why all the buzz about this game has been so strong for so long. It really is a game to sink your teeth into. It's going to reward repeated plays as you get better and more savvy about how, when and where you use your actions. I think the barrier to entry is surprisingly low compared to something of this complexity. So again, it's a game of deep, or it's very deep game, but with very low kind of fiddliness, or you know, it's not got many complications, but it's got a lot of nuances and stuff like that. So yeah, this is a game that just sings to me. I've really enjoyed my plays with it. I'm extremely looking forward to exploring it more, all the different player counts, trying different things, trying the different buildings, and yeah, this is a fantastic game. So definitely check this one out if you haven't. I mean, most Euro gamers have played Puerto Rico, but I was kind of late to the party, I guess. I've only kind of recently picked this one up, but yeah, really enjoying it so far. It gets an amazing rating from me, which is an 8.5 out of 10. But I suppose I'm still pretty new to this game. I've got a lot more to explore with it, but I can see this one going up and creeping up maybe into my top tier of games. So that's Puerto Rico. Definitely a classic and just a brilliant design. So that concludes my review of Puerto Rico. If you have enjoyed it, please hit like and subscribe to my channel and check out my other videos too. For everyone else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye.